landing zones. One of the many company towns Hurston has established for its employees. Lorville is the only import landing zone on the planet, while the city overlooks some of the large strip mining operations that's occurring in the city. Back and Hurston have, but you cannot click it from there. We have to go from outside. Yes, Hurston have yes, the Ether moon, but I'm not know what the moon is actually in the game or not. This Ether moon was after the Ether Hurston, who died during the first Tevarin War, as a reminder of why the products Hurston Dynamics makes are so important. Ether Hurston. Yes, the Magda. The moon was named after Hurston Dynamics CEO Magda Stanton, who made the decision to purchase Stanton from the UE. Magda is the mother of current CEO Colonel Gavin. Yes, the ArcCorp planet will come in 3.5 in 3 months. Well, I'm eating some Christmas cookie and I cannot read when I'm eating, so yes, 10 seconds. Yes, that's the ArcCorp planets. Buildings cover a majority of the planets. Buildings cover the majority, but you can write it differently. You say buildings cover the most part of the planet's surface. You don't need to use this word majority. You just write the most part of the planet. Surface with residential areas relegated to the poles. Yes, you can use other words than this. I don't know what relegated to the poles, while ArcCorp's factories, business headquarters, financial and commercial districts are located in between. Yes, relegated, I think this is centered around the poles, are the most residential areas. Yes, but they will come in the 3.5 and it have some moons too. The ArcCorp planet have 2 more moons. The Lyria moon and Isomoon Futures Active Cryoisos and Cryo Volcanics. And they have another moon. Yes, the Walla. That's a planetary moon. The low density Walla is a particularly suspect, yes. And we had more moons around Hurston. I did not select the Magda. I did that, but we have more. The Eta. Yes, Eta Hurston, but we have 2 more, but we need to zoom in. There's Ariel. Planet the moon was named after the 3rd CEO of Hurston Dynamics, Ariel Hurston, who was known for creating the controversial live labor style employee contracts. And we have one more. Aberdeen, Stanton 1B. This is maybe not inside the game, I don't know. The moon was named after scientist Aberdeen Hurston, who was credited with designing the company's first antimatter warheads. Yes, that's the Hurston, that's the main planet, and we have the Ark core planet, so that will come soon. And then we have the Crusader planets, it's a gas planet, and we have the Microtech. Yes, the Crusader planet is the Stanton 2 is a gas giant, lantern zone, or a low mass giant. We have a lantern zone. Okay, we have a lantern zone, I did not know that. Horizon, a city in the clouds. Horizon offers a breathtaking view. I don't think it's finished yet, I don't know. I just got to the game, but I don't think it's ready, this landing zone. And Quai Astro, we have a space station. Security post Karia, we have that. Oh, that's the wrong planet. That was... Yes, that's Port Olisar, where I live. Port Olisar, located in the trade lanes above Crusader. Port Olisar offers a breathtaking view of the planet below, owned and operated by the Crusader Industries. Port Olisar acts as a gateway to the company's vast planetary holding and orbital shipyards. Yes. And we have this planet Microtech with 2 moons, but it is not in the game yet. So of course, if I try to jump drive to warp to this planet, I will crash. Super Earth's habitals is a terraforming area left of the planet with an unnaturally dense cloud cover and a colder than even this. We have Microtech planet, but it's not in the game yet, I think. And we have 2 moons. The Euterpes, I cannot say that. Euterpe, Stanton 4C, that's the moon, planetary moon, named after the ancient Greek muse of music, Euterpe, which reminds us of gazing. We have 2 moons. Or actually 3 moons. We have Calliope, planetarium named after ancient Greek muse who inspired El Quince to suppose one. Yes. We've got 3 moons, but this is not in the game. I don't think Microtech is not in the game, and the Ark Corp will come with a 3.5 with 2 moons. I don't know how many of the moons around Hurston is active, and the asteroid belts, I don't know if it's there. I don't think it's there. And we have the Crusader gas planet. We have a city in the clouds, but I don't think it's there. This station is there, the Port Olisar and all the stations. Yes, that's Stanton. And we have 28 minutes left. Yes, we just finished part 1.
welcome to another edition of Warmaker's Guide to the Galaxy, where we give you an inside look at the layout, history, and background of the lore of one of the many star systems you'll find in Star Citizen. My name is Dave Haddock. I'm the lead writer over here at Cloud Improved Games, and I am going to be your guide today through the Stanton system. That's right, you've been hearing the name, if you've been keeping track of 3.0 development, and are intimately familiar with a small section of it if you've been playing the PU live, because that takes place entirely around Stanton 2, also known as Crusader. And anyway, so as with all the talk of 3.0 and stuff like that, it just seemed like a good opportunity to kind of take a comprehensive look at the system, and for those of you who aren't familiar with sort of the background of it, give you sort of a high-level, broad overview of the system and planets. And we're toying with the idea of doing a more specialized kind of deep dive into each individual planet, which would consist of like the planet itself, the moon, the landing zone, and the stations that are around it a little bit later. So we'll keep you posted on that. But first, I figure we could start, like we usually do, just sort of talk about the creation of the system itself. This was another old system. It was actually it was done in 2012 originally. It was one of the system unlocks. And I actually copied and pasted the initial pitch of for the system that Ben and I discussed back in an email exchange. And it's fairly simple, as we were coming up with a lot of systems at the time. Basically, in a nutshell, it is, quote, massive super-Earth planets terraformed solely for their resources. Though they technically fall under UEE control, they were sold off to corporations to help fund the synth world, and the corps are going to bleed the planets for every cent that they're worth. Now, obviously some of that has changed since then, but the core of the idea is basically still there. The idea being that Stanton system is technically a UEE system.
I'm eating some Christmas cookies.
Private corporations.
So I make a little noise, but this is the last one. And it tastes very good.
Credited with being discovered by Toshi Aaron in 29.
But I heard a lot more.
Which is relatively recent. But there's actually some debate about it. Basically, the story was that there had been groups of settlers who had known about the system previous to its discovery and had moved into the system before the UEE had even realized that it was there. So when Toshi discovered it, basically there had already been some outposts set up and stuff like that. But since technically he was the first person to sell the jump point route to the UEE, he was credited with its discovery, and sort of worse off for the settlers, they didn't have any rights to the land that they were inhabiting when the UEE surveyors came in to assess the system. But what they found there, and the reason probably why there was a lot of settlers there, was a really, really interesting sort of cosmic setup, if you want to talk about that. So we'll jump right into our handy star map here and have a look at the system itself. So right now we are looking at Earth. Turn on jump points. Okay. So there's the Sol system here. And going to 2D, just to make it a little easier. And Stanton system is over here. So sort of again in the grand scheme of things, you have Vandal systems over here, Terra's here, Xi'an systems are sort of up in this area, Banu's down here, and so Stanton is right here. You can see right now that the jump points, it's connected to Terra, Magnus system, and Pyro. And interesting little fun fact, this actually wasn't its original position in the star map. I think it was actually here. Maybe it was here, but ended up getting...
Yes, that would be a huge, very, very large work if we have like 50 star systems. And it would take like a half a year just to make one system. That's 25 years, so yes, but I have explained that, but we just have time enough to finish this because we've got 23 minutes left on the memory card, so I'll not talk too much. But a 50 star system and takes half a year to design, maybe that's 25 years, and the standard system is not ready yet. We're still getting the Arc Core planet with 2 moons. We get in the update 3.5 that will come in 3 months. And I think we need another planet called a Microtech with 3 moons. It's not in the game yet, but let's watch this.
Change in what I'd like to call the great restructuring of.
But everything is possible if you have money enough, and you can buy manpower, you can buy employees, you can do that. Of course you can do that. You just need a lot of money.
I think it's 20.
It's possible to do this.
We had to do a reshuffle of the Starmap. It was a dangerous time.
And you can
Anyway,
do a lot more. You can do 100 Star
When the
Systems.
UEE, getting back to our history, when the UEE entered,
Depend how much money you have.
system, what was it that they found that was super interesting? Well, let's have a quick look. So go in here, and you have 4 planets, basically all within the green zone of the star. So they're all basically habitable planets, or at least would require like kind of a minimal terraforming thing. And I like to call them basically turnkey planets. So basically they were kind of ready to move in type thing. So that was very, very beneficial for the UE at the time, because at that time they were actually kind of having money problems. There was a thing called Project Archangel, which is also more commonly known as the Synth World, which was the government's attempt to sort of wash away the sins of the past through kind of terraforming horribleness and create a planet from scratch. The idea being that if they can create a planet, they won't ever have to sort of deal with the sort of moral quandary of terraforming again, which is a sweet idea, but unfortunately it's been vacuuming up money at sort of a staggering rate. So, I mean, you take that and put it on top of sort of their struggles with the Vandal, fighting crime, general infrastructure needs, you know, a massive government with, you know, planets and stuff like that under their control. It was fairly obvious that they basically were hurting. And what they could use was a financial windfall. So the government was sort of struggling with what to do with the system for a while, because they couldn't really afford to kind of start developing this thing on its own. So the government came up with an idea that was equally called ingenious and despicable in the same Senate session. And that plan was to sell the planets to corporations who would undertake the financial responsibilities to maintain and develop the worlds. So obviously that was a very radical idea, never been done before, and obviously had a huge amount of like kind of, again, moral, ethical, social, political implications and stuff like that. So it required a lot of conversation, but they ended up kind of going through with it and sold the planets to 4 mega corporations. So we'll quickly go over them. There's Hurston Dynamics, who was sort of a very long time weapons manufacturer. Crusader Industries, who makes Starliners. ArcCorp, who is sort of amorphous conglomerate megacorp. They're known for sort of fusion engines and I think some mining and terraforming, but they just absorb companies, basically. They're like the Blob. And Microtech on the very edge, who make Mobiglass. So everybody has a Mobiglass, so you can imagine how rich they are. So anyway, again, this was totally new territory for them. So they had to, there's a lot of time spent sort of hammering out the specifics of the sale and how would this work and responsibilities of the companies that they would need to adhere to and stuff like that. And I mean, because there's technically a UEE system, the corporations were required, just like every planet, even if it's recognized or not, is required to adhere to what's known as the common laws, which are basically the fundamental personal freedoms enjoyed by everybody in the UEE. It doesn't matter if you're citizen, civilian, whatever. If you're living in the UEE, you are protected by common laws, which kind of cover like standardized safety practices for structures, products, health services, basic education, trade, travel, and security are them in a nutshell. The trade-off for it was, I mentioned earlier, the recognized planets. The planets in the Stanton system would, by their very nature, would never be allowed to be recognized, which basically meant that they could never be represented in the Senate. And the idea behind that was that, you know, if, say, for example, they allowed them to have a senator, that senator would be more beholden to the corporation who sent them there than to the sort of the population of the planet. So they basically were like, there's no way that they could they would be that impartial, so they just basically took it off the table, and they're like, they will never be basically recognized and represented in government. So yeah, but for those who keep up with our sort of weekly news updates, you know, will probably know that although these sales were finalized and, you know, this happened sort of a while ago, there's still issues arise from time to time where there's sort of new scenarios or situations pop up that require them to sort of revisit, like, all right, well, how are we going to handle this? I'll add a link to the article in the description below, but that was an article we did recently that sort of talked about the crime stats in Stanton were being sort of misrepresented and sort of what the implications of that and what it meant and stuff, but I'll send a link down there. But we'll basically step through the plans of the system real quick. So first one, as I mentioned, is Hurston. Stanton 1, known hopefully as Hurston, but is owned by Hurston Dynamics. And they are sort of the controversial epicenter of this system. It's a family-owned corporation that has existed for centuries. They're like very old school kind of earth money. And they've made their fortune selling weapons. So ship weapons all the way down to personal weapons and stuff like that. And so the source of this controversy is sort of twofold. One, the ecosystem of this planet has basically just been destroyed. They do not, to say that Hurston does not care about the ecosystem of the planet is probably an understatement. It has been just ripped by strip mining, heavy pollution from their massive production facilities, and they test weapons down there. So they're just blasting parts of the landscape away with new guns and bombs and missiles and all sorts of stuff. You know, so they're kind of, they really don't care about the planet. And second, the Hurstons basically control their workers with an iron fist. Like they, as far as a company to work for, the Hurstons have one of the worst ones you can possibly imagine. I mean, civil rights advocates routinely chastise this corporation for the living conditions of the workers, but because the executives are sort of careful enough to adhere to the common laws, at least as far as being provable in court, they've sort of managed to escape serious punishment, but they're always kind of on the coals. But they kind of don't treat their workers well. And it's important to know also, actually, that there's a distinction when I'm referring to the workers' condition, because the executives at the company have a very different experience on Hurston. You know, those that are in sort of higher ranks within the company hierarchy, you know, get to enjoy gated communities and amenities that are basically super luxurious than anything that the workers have access to. So obviously this has created somewhat of a huge cultural and financial divide between the two sides, and whether anything comes from this tension remains to be seen, but the executives aren't dumb and they're keeping an eye on their workers. So in a nutshell, it's a super fun place to visit, and I'm sure great for the family. So next, we have, speaking of family-friendly spots, we have Crusader right here, which is actually a fun one because it's a low-mass gas giant, which I know a lot of people actually seemed befuddled by because it exists so close to the star, but I'm assured it's real. Basically, if you're asking yourself, why would a company particularly want to purchase a planet that has no ground that's accessible, then you deserve a cookie, because that's a great question. The answer is that Crusader Industries, who ended up buying it, manufacture basic commercial transport ships. So they do, you know, small commuter type stuff, all the way up to, you know, basically high volume or high capacity like starliners and stuff like that. So what they did is they actually used this gas giant because the atmosphere is breathable high enough that they created these sort of like extensive lattice works that are basically like floating shipyards. So they're able to construct most of their ships basically in atmosphere, which is a sort of a unique experience for them. Like, it's not something that happens very commonly. So it's actually kind of perfect for them, is that they can start the construction in atmosphere and then move basically the ships off the planet to finish them up if they need to, or whatever. But basically, on the plus side, it creates these sort of amazing vistas, and I'm sure I can link some links to some of the concept art that's been done. But it's just beautiful, like sprawling clouds, very, very, very pretty. And so, as far as the company itself, though, conversely to Hurston, who kind of treats its workers